Hello, and welcome to this on-demand webinar. Get started with Gantt Charts for Structure PPM. Here's the agenda for this session. We'll start by answering the question, what is Gantt Charts for Structure PPM? The majority of our time will be spent demoing the product. We'll talk about scheduling options. We'll of course build a roadmap. We'll discuss agile planning with Gantt Charts. You'll see how to configure your Gantt charts for diverse applications. There will be a use case example, cross-team project tracking. And we'll end by talking about Gantt charts integrations with another Tempo app, Capacity Planner. And here's some quick housekeeping before we get started. Since this is an on-demand webinar, feel free to skip ahead to specific sections that interest you or that you want to learn about. If you have any questions while you're watching, you can reach out to our team in the corresponding link on this page. At the end of this on-demand webinar, we'll provide you with some next steps to keep you going on your learning journey. And lastly, an important note. Gantt Charts is an add-on to Structure PPM. You need to have Structure to use Gantt Charts. And you will benefit most from this webinar if you already have basic knowledge of Structure. If you're new to Structure, we recommend watching our on-demand webinar Get Started with Structure PPM before watching this one. So let's answer the question, what is Gantt Charts for Structure PPM? You already know that Structure PPM is the most flexible project and program management solution for Jira. Adding Gantt Charts, the #1 extension for Structure, elevates your PPM even more. Powered by Structure's custom hierarchies, Gantt Charts enables individual teams to visualize project plans, schedules, and dependencies precisely as needed, from agile to waterfall or anything in between, while providing a real-time view of work across teams. So our product expert Alex will be going right into Gantt Charts soon, but first I'm going to quickly go over some main Gantt chart concepts. You may be familiar with Gantt Charts already. They've been around for a while and are quite common across many industries. They offer a unique combination of visual clarity, simplicity, and functionality combined with adaptability to modern environments and frameworks. Essentially, Gantt Charts allow you to methodically plan and monitor your work, helping you organize projects, improve your overall visibility, and keep everyone on track. They function well with numerous ways of working, such as waterfall, agile, a mix of these, or really any other type of workflow. As a road mapping tool, Gantt Charts support C-levels in making informed decisions, as well as ensuring efficient execution of strategic initiatives across their organization. I'll now hand it over to Alex, who will jump into Structure and Gantt Charts to show you just how powerful this duo can be.
Hi everyone, and welcome to our Gantt Charts for Structure PPM webinar. In this webinar, we will cover the basics of the Gantt Charts add-on, see how it contributes to the structure, and what kind of use cases it can help solve. We will go over its main settings and configurations, and various ways to apply these settings to build different visualizations. So let's start from the beginning. Gantt Charts is an extension to Structure application that creates comprehensive Gantt-like charts. It is based on Structure custom hierarchies and enables teams and individuals to visualize project plans, schedules, and dependencies exactly as they need to. And though it is called Gantt Charts, its functionality is way above the classical Gantt Charts visualizations that we all used to. Of course, it's absolutely possible to use it for classical waterfallish scheduling or so-called traditional project management. But at the same time, it's flexible enough to handle iterative or agile project management approaches. And of course, we can mix and match those two methodologies in one view, creating a holistic overview of the multiple teams working in different environments, visualized on a single chart. I'm going to start from scratch and create a basic road mapping visualization. Since each Gantt chart is unique for structure board it is used with, I will create a new structure with a new scope for our case. I will use the power mode, give that structure a name, and leave everything else by default. Now let's bring in some issues in our structure board. For the scope, I will select several Jira projects I have. An issue type I want to see is epics. Since this is the first time a Gantt chart created for this structure, default Gantt chart settings are applied. By default, tasks on chart are scheduled on the project start date, which is today's date, And Jira's original estimate field is used for task work estimation. Before we proceed with building the use case, let's first look at the task scheduling options we have. I will add a column with original estimate Jira field so we could see our work estimations in real time. And also, let's for a moment concentrate on just these two tasks here. As I mentioned, by default, tasks are scheduled on the project start date, which by default is the date of creation of the Gantt chart. This type of scheduling, when no Jira date or structure attribute date is used, called alt mode. In this mode, a task start date will be either scheduled to the project start date, or if there is an existing dependency on the chart, based on that dependency. Task's end date in this mode is automatically calculated based on the work estimation value, which is by default Jira original estimate. Contrary to auto-scheduling mode, there is a manual mode. In manual mode, tasks are scheduled with specific dates from Jira or from Structure, explicitly marking the beginning and end of a task on a timeline. But before we're able to schedule tasks manually, we need to let Gantt know which fields will be used for start and finish date on the chart. We will do that in the chart settings under the scheduling tab in the manual scheduling section. First, we need to enable manual scheduling functionality by selecting the checkbox. After that, we can select corresponding fields from Jira or structure attributes to be used as a scheduling dates on the Gantt chart. We can also select a formula to use scripting conditions to automatically calculate dates for our chart. And I'll talk about how formula can be used in Gantt charts a bit later. I will select Jira start date to be used as the Gantt start date and Jira due date for the Gantt finish date. I also select due date for the milestone dates. Now, as they return back to the Gantt, there is nothing has changed there yet because my Jira fields are empty and there are no dates inside it. To populate those fields with the dates, I will add the start and due dates as the structure columns. Now I can add my dates here directly in the columns. You can see as I add a date, the task on the chart will jump to the corresponding place on the timeline. Similarly, I add a due date, which would define the finish date of my task. So now I explicitly scheduled this task with two manual dates, pinning it to a specific position on the timeline. I can see an icon informing me that there is a schedule conflict, but I will handle that in a moment. Let's now add a start date to the second task. You can notice that this task now is scheduled with start date, but there is nothing for finish date yet. And if I click on the task itself and open Task Details panel, we can see that there is no manual finish date. Instead, we have a date calculated automatically based on work estimations, which by default based on original estimates. So we can combine these two approaches with manual scheduling and auto scheduling, providing one of the dates manually, whether it be start or finish date, and the other date is calculated automatically based on the work estimations, which define task durations. And since I mentioned durations, let's look at that warning icon we have over here. This indicates I have a scheduling conflict. And this is because I had my work estimation set earlier as 4 weeks, 2 days, and 7 hours, but then I scheduled my task manually with dates, and now dates define duration of these tasks. And this new duration defined with dates is almost 2 days shorter. So to solve this conflict, I need either decrease the estimates so it would align with the task duration set by start and finish date, or I can change one of the dates so a new duration would correspond to my work estimations. I will scroll down to the bottom of the panel, click Resolve, and select Increase Duration, which would reschedule the end date of the task. Now, as we know different ways of scheduling tasks on the chart, let's go ahead and proceed with building a simple roadmap. We will be using different assumptions on how we schedule items based on if we know exactly when the item should start and finish, or if we want to commit to specific dates. Or maybe we are not certain about dates yet and just have a rough understanding on the sequence of the work we have. In this case, we can use dependencies stuck in tasks in a certain sequence without really committing to any dates yet. So let's put some dates in for that item. Let's say we want to start this task on the 27th of May, and we plan to finish it on 20th of August. For these tasks, I don't know yet planned start and finish dates, but I know that they should be completed one after another, so I can create a cascading dependency between three of them. Of course, we can mix and match those two approaches, and some of the items can be scheduled manually, and some connected to them with the dependency, creating a holistic dependency chain. You can also notice that some of the tasks are missing estimation value. In this case, Gantt assigns a default work estimation to these items, which equals to a single day, and we can go into the settings and change this value if needed. Of course, we can update the value directly in the structure column. So let's, for example, put 5 weeks for this item. And I can also work with durations and work estimation directly on the chart. I can drag by one side of the task and increase its duration, which would automatically increase the estimation assigned to it. There is also an option of dragging task across the chart, which would affect its manual dates. So if a task was auto-scheduled, it will be converted into the manual scheduling mode with the dates assigned depending on where we put this item on the timeline. We can see how these dates automatically populated in the selected fields we have for our scheduling. Same principle applies if I move a manually scheduled items to some different place on the chart. Let's move this item a bit further into the future. And this movement will also update the existing dates to the new ones. So Structure Gantt always connected live to Jira. That means when we apply updates on the chart itself, these updates immediately change information in Jira and vice versa. So we always see a real picture, and multiple people working with the same information will always be on the same page. So there's no update delays or outdated information provided. So to summarize, using the information we have on our hands right now and stored in Jira, and using assumptions on how the work should be scheduled on the chart, we can create a realistic and lively updated roadmap that will reflect the current state of the progress we have, with the ability to flexibly adjust it on the fly if needed. Now let's change gears and look at another example. This time we will plan within a hierarchical view. I will be using a simple two-level hierarchy with epics and stories underneath. But before we proceed, I will slightly change Gantt chart settings. So in this example, instead of using time tracking or original and remaining estimates for my work estimation, I will use a custom attribute to define the amount of work in my tasks. And this custom attribute can be any Jira field, including custom field, that would explicitly define how much work my tasks contain. A field I want to select is story points. And because story points is a numeric value, we need to translate this value into the amount of time on the chart. So for that, we have format field here, which provides several options to choose from. I'm selecting the story points option, which would allow me to use the hours ratio, converting story points values into number of hours. So let's say one story point would equal 4 hours of work. Now my Gantt view is recalculated based on new work estimations. I will also change the view by hiding summary and task icons from the chart for better visibility. Let's add a story points column into the structure as well. Here again, we use a mix of items scheduled by dates and scheduled automatically by dependencies. You can also notice that in this hierarchical example, parent items are not shown as individual tasks on the chart, but rather as folders or buckets. That means that start and finish date of a parent is dictated by its children underneath. So by changing scheduled position of child items, I can reschedule start and end date of a parent. And this one can be considered a bottom-up scheduling when we don't look at or don't know a parent estimation values, but we can schedule its children with some certainty. In our example, we have epics scheduled by its children's stories. And the start and end date of epics defined by its children can be seen inside the buckets. We can add these calculated dates, which are Gantt attributes, as structure columns. We need Gantt start date and Gantt finish date. Now we can look and compare the different scheduling dates, the ones based on the original assumptions about Epic's start and end date we had at the beginning, and the dates resulted from scheduling Epic's children. And if required, we can copy these Gantt calculated attributes into the Jira fields and store it inside Jira tickets. We have option to copy them into the same Jira field we used for scheduling our epics, or we can copy them into other fields just to have them there for reference. This behavior with showing parent as a group can be changed inside Gantt settings. We can disable this behavior if we want our parent items shown as individual tasks on the Gantt chart. In this scenario, parent tasks use either manual dates from assigned fields, or if they are auto-scheduled dependencies or project start date. Scheduled position of their children would not affect them in that case, and if any of the child items is scheduled outside of parent boundaries, there will be no warning by default on the chart. So this mode may work in some specific agile or loosely coupled project setups. For example, when a parent task acts more like a phase level rather than a time-bound container, or when a subtask is delayed or prolonged due to unexpected circumstances and needs to be scheduled outside of its parent. Whatever the case is, Gantt's flexible settings allow to handle that easily. But in the most planning setups, using parents in the hierarchy as groups is a pretty common approach, so that setting is used as a default in Structure Gantt as well. Let's look at that Rogue One item here. It's an epic without story points estimation, so it is assigned a default value, which is 4 hours. I will increase its duration a little bit for better visibility. And you can notice it is shown as a standalone task and not as a group. And this is because it doesn't have any children yet. So it's treated as an individual task with its own estimations and scheduling logic, but as soon as we start adding children underneath, it would transform itself into a group. Let's now look at another feature that allows comparing different stages of scheduling, and this feature is baselines. So baselines is essentially a snapshot of the current state of the task on the timeline, which can then be compared to the new state. But before I go and create new baselines, I'll return back to the one-level view with epics representing high-level planning. So that's normally how planning work starts. We have our high-level initiatives or epics, preliminary estimated, representing big chunks of work, which then will be broken down into subcomponents. I will add a new baseline and name it Phase 1. Now we can see that the current position of our task is shadowed by its baselines. And if our plans are changing, we reschedule items, we are able to see how the new state corresponds to the previous one. Let's now return to a two-level hierarchy, simulating that we have broken down our epics into stories and stories were estimated by teams. And now we want to compare how our original plan changed based on bottom-up estimations. So we see that there are significant changes in our planning and scheduling of the epics on the timeline. And this is absolutely normal because at the moment we planned on high level with epics, we had some assumption on how long this work would take without really drilling down into details. But now as we scoped our work and scheduled everything in accordance with its priority, we can reevaluate our epics and compare it with original state. This gives us a good look at how accurate our original planning was and where we are standing now. We can have multiple baselines created in the different stages of the project execution, visualizing how the project plan is evolving. Let's now talk about another popular use case, which is sprint management. I have working items here from Jira projects containing sprints added to the first level. And if we look at the Gantt chart, we can see that everything now placed on the project start date. And this is because items in this project are planned with sprints and don't have any dedicated start and finish date. We will reorganize everything so it would make more sense, but before that, let's go into the Gantt settings and change its configuration a bit. We'll open Scheduling panel, and under Manual Scheduling section, we will enable Use Sprints for Manual Scheduling option. This option allows to use Jira Sprint start and end date as manual scheduling dates for tasks on the Gantt chart. So as soon as we add those dates in sprint settings, they will automatically be used by Gantt. We also select Backlog Board, so the Gantt would know where the sprint's backlog is stored. Now I can see on the chart that the tasks that have sprint started and end date are scheduled using those boundaries. Tasks in sprint without populated dates are still on the project start date, and the ones that are in the backlog are placed in the dedicated bucket to the left. Now let's work with our scope. I will group everything by sprints. As I do that, my tasks belonging to the sprints jump to a specific position on the chart, which indicates each sprint bucket. Items in the sprint that don't have dates are kept on the project start date, and the backlog items are organized at the bottom. Let's return to the Gantt settings for a second and go again to the Scheduling tab. And at the very bottom, there is a sprint configuration setting that would allow set up manually sprint starts and durations. So using it, I can arrange my work in sprint buckets without really committing to the dates in Jira yet. So we use standard 2 weeks durations and sprint start on Monday. Now as we return back, everything will be neatly organized in several buckets, no task on project start date, and all sprints are scheduled in 2 weeks cadence. It is also very easy now to drag tasks from backlog into an appropriate sprint on the chart. We can also put different markers on the chart's timeline. So by default, we have the today's date and the project start date. But we can also put there manual ones. It can be based on fixed versions, which works pretty good with sprint planning. In this case, we need to go into the settings and select which fixed version we want to use. But we can also add markers manually, just placing it on a specific date to signify a certain version, release date, or just to be used as a planning boundaries. We can create as many markers as we want just by double-clicking on the timeline. Custom markers position on the chart can be easily adjusted by dragging it to a new place, or it can be simply deleted. We can also hide and show markers from item menu. Let's quickly go over other basic configurations we have. In the scheduling section, we have progress calculation. This setting defines how the progress is visualized on the Gantt charts inside tasks. By default, it is based on Gantt work estimates, but we can select this value from other fields, including custom fields, or use structure formula option that can be used to create custom progress calculations. The next tab we have is appearance. On this tab, you can define visual aspect of tasks on the chart. Here we can select bold mode, which would make task bars look thicker and colors to be bolder. Also, task name and keys will be displayed within the taskbars rather than beside it. On the same page, we can define exceptions. And exceptions allow to apply different colors to specific taskbars based on certain conditions. So for example, I want to color code differently items in specific status. So just type in the GQL condition over here and choose a color. Another important setting is dependencies. Here we can define what kind of dependencies are used by Gantt. By default, Gantt uses finish to start type of dependency, which in turn uses blog issue link type underneath. So each dependency in Gantt is actually a Jira link between two items. And we can use different issue link types with different Gantt dependencies. So let's, for example, add to finish dependency the relates to issue link type. Now we can connect two items by their finish dates with this finish dependency. This action automatically creates relates to link types between the two tasks in Jira. The Timeline tab allows to customize elements displayed on the timeline, such as adding chart markers, which I showed before, or adding time increments like program increments for safe planning or custom sprint durations. The Resources tab allows us to set up the way resources are treated on the Gantt chart. This section provides lots of configurations to define what is used as a resource in Gantt and how it behaves, but this is subject for more advanced webinars. For now, just select Assignee as a resource. Now, as we have our resources selected, we can see them shown near the taskbars. We can also look now at the Resource Management panel. It shows work allocations across each task we have on the chart. It is based on work estimations we set in our configuration and also on the Gantt resource calendar, which defines how much time a resource can spend working on these tasks. The default value is 40 hours per week. So if we schedule for the same resource several tasks within the same timeline, this resource will be over-allocated because he would need then more than 8 hours per day to work on these tasks. And this over-allocation will be shown in red. We can solve this overallocation problem by reassigning one of the tasks to another resource or rescheduling it manually to another date. We can also use a tool called resource leveling, which would automatically move tasks on the timeline that they will be no longer overallocated. And last but not least, the slices. Slices allow you to fine-tune your chart's configuration for a specific set of tasks. When you create a slice, you basically tell Gantt to override the default configuration for certain tasks using new configuration rules that you establish for that slice. Similar to appearance settings, slices can be based on issue types or GQL query. I will use query condition and select one of the projects I have in my scope. For this project, I will use different type of work estimation. So instead of default original estimate scheduling, I'll use the custom one based on story points. So returning back, I can see how these tasks now have different duration because of the different work estimation type. This can be used when you have different project or different teams using the different work estimation methods. Some utilize time estimations only, and some relative estimations like story points or t-shirt sizes. So Gantt settings allow flexibly combining those together on the same timeline. Now that we have all the basic knowledge about Gantt functionalities, let's apply it to building another use case, this time for teams progress tracking. As usually, we start with the structure scope. I have a bunch of epics from multiple projects on my first level. I'm going to group it by teams field, so I could see how the work is spread across my teams. Now let's open the Gantt and go into its settings to create our configuration. I will keep the scheduling tab mostly by default, using time tracking as the work estimation method. Manual dates will be start and due date, and I will use parents as a group. For the progress tab, which defines how the progress is visualized on taskbars, I want to use a formula. In the formula, I will select progress by status column I already have in my structure view. I need to make sure that my formula attribute is associated with the correct structure column, and I also check that the statuses there are the right ones. I would also need to multiply this value by 100 because Gantt chart considers progress value being between 0 and 100. In the Appearance tab, I will select Bold Mode and choose the base bar color. I will also color code a couple of exceptions. First, I want items and status in progress to be purple. Then also I want to highlight tasks based on their priority. I want taskbars that are in critical and high priority status to be red. I'm not going to change anything in dependency and timeline tabs. Within resources, I just make sure that assignee is my selected resource. I would like to add a slice. So I have multiple teams in scope working with different frameworks. Among them, I have one team that uses agile practices. So I will create a slice for them. We'll call it agile teams and select Chico option with the corresponding team name. For this team, I will use different work estimations method and different manual scheduling settings. So for work estimates, instead of time tracking and original estimates, I will be using custom estimates and story points. I will put hours ratio equals 6, so 6 hours in one story point. And for manual scheduling, I will use sprints and prefer sprints over manual dates. I'm not going to use backlog board, since in this particular view with multiple teams on the single timeline, it doesn't really make sense. So let's look at what we have. So we built a chart with consolidated view of multiple teams' work that uses different scheduling method and estimations. We can toggle on and off the summary and keys if necessary. And I also want to add a marker that would signify release date. Let's also look at the resource panel. Obviously, we have some overallocations that we can try to resolve. I will use resource leveling tool, select the options for leveling everything with all resources included. And now we should have a clearly view with everything scheduled around our resources availability. So that concludes our Getting Started with Gantt webinar. Here we tried to cover the basic functionalities and configurations. There are lots of other things that Structure Gantt can help with. For example, complex use cases such as short-term planning, resource load tracking, dependency management, and Gantt reverse or retrospective planning. All these topics we will cover in subsequent webinar series. So thank you everyone for your attention and see you soon.
All right, so before we end our webinar, I'm going to talk just a little bit about how Gantt Charts integrates with another Tempo app. This app is Capacity Planner. Using these tools together, you can plan work anywhere and visualize allocations across all of Jira. To be specific, you can visualize resource allocation and spot over allocation using individual or team data from Capacity Planner. Capacity Planner data can be used to schedule work within a Gantt chart you've already created. You can plan by teams or individual users. And you can include planned work from across the company, even if that work isn't part of your Gantt project. If you'd like to continue your learning journey with Gantt charts for Structure PPM or any other Tempo products, be sure to check out more of our learning resources. Some specific resources that will be helpful for you are a Gantt charts product tour video, our Help Center section dedicated to learning about Gantt charts, the Tempo website, and lastly, our portal to submit questions so you can get the answers that you're looking for. So thank you for watching this on-demand webinar. We hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please reach out to us and we'll follow up with you soon. Thanks again and have a great day.